My sister and her husband have been struggling with infertility since they got married 12 years ago. They've tried absolutely everything, from medical to spiritual, but unfortunately, nothing works. Now that she's approaching late 30s, they're starting to look into adoption, but it's also been a slow going. Since their financial condition isn't exactly stable from multiple rounds of fertility treatments they went through. I can only imagine the struggle, and I sympathize with her. But the stress this situation is bringing her and her husband honestly puts a strain on our relationship. My husband and I lost our best friends, Mason and his wife, Kate, 2 weeks ago in a horrible car accident. They left behind their son Pete, who isn't even 2 yet. It was so sudden and so heart-wrenching. We're still grieving, which lowers out contact with a lot of people, including my sister and Bil. Our main concern right now is ourselves and Pete, whose custody has come to us because we're both his godparents. Actively engaged in Pete's life since his birth. And because Mason and Kate have neither left a will nor have immediate living relatives who can take him in. We've decided to adopt Pete as soon as we can stomach the process. My husband and I never planned on having kids, and even if we did, this is absolutely not the way we want to go about it. The situation is far from ideal, but we're starting the adoption process yesterday, for Pete's safety if nothing else. We broke the news to our extended families and friends, letting them know that my husband and I won't be very available for a little longer because of this. I know my sister and brother-in-law will have something to say about this. I'm prepared for a few heated text messages or voicemails. However, I didn't expect them to turn up on our doorstep, crying about how unfair it is that we were given everything they wanted, and how we didn't deserve to be parents because we didn't go through what they had to. I've never seen my husband so angry before. He's usually very mild and gentle, but recent events have stretched our patience to the limits. We kicked them off of our porch, and I told my sister before she left that since our pain inconveniences her so much, I won't have her around me and my family at all anymore. I know she made a fuss about it, and now everyone has something to say to us. We turned off our phones, so we don't know which ones are cursing us and which one aren't. I know some did //r. My husband and I are both in pain and grieving, and we can't trust ourselves to be objective. For the sake of disclosure, my husband and I are both men. No, this is not a case of homophobia. My sister, for all her fault, was the first person to accept me for who I love. I have been with my partner for 7 years. We initially met online, and after meeting in person a few times, and realizing our affection for one another, we found it promising to move in together. I moved from California to Pennsylvania to be with him throughout graduate school. All was seemingly well during this time. I have never really had any reason to not trust him. I encouraged him to very much so, to try his best to make friends, or to explore hobbies on his own outside of the various ones we share, because I have my own passions. And I found we connected most when we met in the middle through conversations about these passions, through the act of explaining or showcasing what we've taken in or learned. Throughout these 7 years, he has struggled with very low self-esteem. And though I don't necessarily think of myself as the pillar of self-love, the depth of mine doesn't reach the low perception of his self-value. Because of this, he has seen and stopped seeing both a counselor and a therapist, and has been on medication to help for the last 6 months. Things were seemingly well between us, and continued to be pretty fluid. We continued to share things, and take long walks, and were pretty open-ended about where we stood in the relationship. If one was feeling a bit of an ebb, the other would pick up more of a share, and vice versa. However, things took a bit of a dip about 2 days ago when I felt the ebb and asked him about it. Initially, he said there was really nothing wrong. And perhaps I was just feeling this way because with our schedules we haven't been able to see one another for long periods of time like we are used to, which is true. But the feeling continued to irk me, and when I asked about it a second time, he confessed to me. He had begun talking to another girl from another country via Instagram direct messages. And though things between she and him never crossed the boundaries of platonic friendship, he really loved the initial rush of someone asking him questions about his favorite movie, his favorite album, his favorite book. All things he and I already know very well about one another. I asked if he'd sent any selfies, or anything risque, and he said no, though I can't confirm, because he deleted the messages? A good deal of me believes him, because of how open he was about the initial conversations to begin with. We slept apart, and I just felt really confused the entire night, because I couldn't really resonate with wanting that sort of attention from someone else. If anything, his yearning for that type of attention sort of hurt. It felt like I wasn't doing enough, or giving enough. The next morning, though I don't have an Instagram, and am not on the app, I went to check his using the desktop version, and found that posts where he once called me the love of his life, or a specific post with a gift I gave him that once said, "Greatest gift from the greatest girl," were still on his profile, but the words, "girlfriend," or "love of my life," were completed erased. With this realization, my confusion and hurt turned to very real heartache. I called him and asked if he had deleted these words from the specific posts, and with shame, he said yes, he did. When I asked why, he said it was because he just didn't want the attention from the girl asking him about himself to be disrupted if she found out he was in a long-term relationship. I guess this is where I asked the obvious and questioned why someone who is just asking about your favorite books, movies, etc., would be driven away by the fact that you have a girlfriend. And he said he didn't know why he did it, and that it was a massive mistake. At the risk of seeming toxic, and I will take full accountability for seeming so or being so, I asked him to please deactivate his Instagram for the time being while we sort through this, his Twitter as well. He did, and though I was feeling a bit of relief about that, I couldn't help but feel a bit saddened that he didn't choose to do that on his own for the benefit of our relationship. He had to wait for me to ask. Which again, just made me feel like such a toxic and controlling partner. Two things I always strive to be so far from. When he got home from work, we discussed everything at massive length, and he continued to swear up and down that these conversations pertained strictly to music, movies, and books, and he didn't have interest in her. Just interest in the initial rush of the attention he was receiving. We read a few articles, and he broke things down to me as his self-esteem has never been lower. Despite his career as a doctor being at a high, and his finances in order, he felt things with his music weren't taking off. And with that came a feeling that he wasn't special, and it was nice for someone to make him feel that way. I felt shame and asked him if I wasn't doing enough or giving enough to him to make him feel that way. He said, I defiantly was. But my love, and attention and affection, became a pillar he could rely on, and got used to, so with new attention came a rush. And he liked that. I asked him if he wanted to be single, and find that rush in dating new people. And he kept insisting that that's so far from what he wants. He wants to remain a couple, and do all he can to work on these things together. Though I can't help but correlate that feeling he enjoys with the feeling of a first date. Which hurts, of course. I told him I didn't really see how we could move past this because there was nothing much for me to make an attempt to work on moving forward. This seems to be a self-stemming problem that I emphasize with, but just don't want to be on the receiving end of the counter effects. So though it is incredibly uneasy to begin to think of how difficult it'll be to begin again, it is just as difficult to think about how difficult it would be to stay and try to rebuild back up an issue that I feel like just a bystander. When it comes to this has all been very painful, and if this comes to an end, I just want it to be as civil and as possible. He deserves to love himself, but not at the expense of the love we have between us. I deserve love that is stable and comforting, and not laced with newfound paranoia. Despite this all, my heart is still very much in this, of course, and he has been very vocal about how it was just one mistake. Nothing happened, we can work through this, etc. And I secretly keep hoping he will make a step, any step really, to showcase these words and implement action, seek a new therapist. Find the two of us a relationship counselor, buy a book on self-help or on how couple conquer affairs, anything at all. Without me having to be the one to ask him. I just want him to have that yearning that he continues to say he has, but instead of saying it, I was him to show me. That makes me irrational or just plain dumb. I believe to be in a state where I can handle either answer, or something completely different just the same. Do all think I'm blowing something completely out of proportion? Given how this was an exchange of conversation between him and another girl for just a few days, and his erasure of me on his profile was only for about 2 days? This has been a first in this relationship, this has been a first in my life, truthfully. I just felt completely vulnerable and isolated. I want to start by saying that I don't have the best relationship with my mom. I have an older sister, and growing up my mom always tended to control me and tried to override any decisions I make, saying that I was young and naive and she always knew better. I cut contact with her for a few months after she tried to get involved in my marriage. My husband and I been together for 3 years, and he has always been telling me to be more gentle with my mom. I had a miscarriage a few days ago. It's devastating and I really thought it'll get easier, but I'm still feeling excruciating pain and frustration. We were happy and excited, but all that disappeared suddenly, and it was hard for me to take because I thought everything was fine. I didn't tell anyone, especially since I'm currently dealing with some health issues. I didn't tell anyone in the family. My husband promised not to tell until I'm ready. My mom kept asking me questions and brought up my pregnancy constantly, and my answers were short. Because I didn't want her to know, since she'd call everybody and let them know. She's always like this, that's why I tend to keep things private. I decided to not visit for a couple of days, hoping she'd stop asking questions. Then I found out on FB that my mom announced my miscarriage on her page, and I didn't know about that. I was shocked. I freaked out when I started getting calls from family members, and I have no idea how many people knew about it. I was so mad to the point of shaking. Everyone kept berating me for not telling them. I called my mom and I yelled at her. She defended herself, saying that she was just looking for support and that I should have told her about it. First time she asked what was wrong, I asked her who told her, and she said she had a talk with my doctor, but I shouldn't be mad because she's my mom and she had the right to know what's going on. I argued with her about getting involved in my personal life and disregarding my feelings and cutting me off guard like that. I went to the doctor and I lashed out at her for releasing my private medical information to my mom and causing me to deal with everyone asking why I was hiding my miscarriage from them, even though I was just waiting for the right time. I told my doctor that I was going to file a complaint against her the same day, since she didn't respect my privacy, and decided to give my mom information about my medical records. My mom heard and started berating me, saying it wasn't the doctor's fault and that she was a friend of hers she knew years ago, but I didn't know about it. She said that I went too far and acted like my family were strangers. She said that she's my mom and I didn't need to overreact like that. All I needed was time and space. Now I have to deal with all this stress and I'm a mess right now. My brother texted me a few minutes ago and said he wants to come over and talk to me. He was the first to call me and berated me and said that I was being hostile towards everyone for no reason. I haven't replied to his text yet, but I don't want to see anyone right now. I can't take one more word from them. One of my best friends lives in a different country. We met years ago online and have talked almost daily to what is approaching a decade. We have both flown back and forth once or twice a year to see the other and hang out, and we've always been there for each other's big moments. She found out last year that she is expecting her first child, and it was amazing news for us all. I was so happy for her to start the family I know she's always wanted with her husband. She came to visit a few months into her pregnancy and asked me to be the baby's godmother. I was over the moon. While we live an 8-hour plane ride from each other. I do have a job that gives me decent vacation allowance and deals with certain airlines that makes visiting manageable. I knew that I could be there for her, and told her that whenever she was ready for someone outside of the family to be there, I would make the trip. Last month, she had her baby shower. And I only found out when I saw on Instagram a mutual friend who lives in the same city as me had surprised her at the shower. I hadn't been invited. I was a little hurt and surprised, but it was the busiest month of the year for the company I work for, and I knew she knew that. So I figured that could be the reason, sent my gift by airmail and said congratulations. However, now she's reached out to me and told me that she has asked another friend, the same person who went to the baby shower, to be the baby's godmother, and that she only wants her child to have one. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I was heartbroken and felt a bit betrayed. For 6 months I have been excited to take on the role. My own godmother lives in New Zealand and has done for most of my life, so I knew it could work. Knew how to stay in contact and be a part of the child's life while living in another country. But now she's taken back her offer and chosen someone else. I wouldn't be so upset if she had chosen someone who lived closer. But she has replaced me with someone who lives in the same city as me, so it's not a distance thing. We have been friends for years. I have been there with updates, support, and love her whole pregnancy. And at no point was there any clue she had changed her mind until the baby shower a few weeks ago. I don't know if I should confront her, tell her I'm hurt, or just accept her decision. It's her baby. And I would never want to force her into a decision she wasn't happy with. I just don't know what to do or say to her now. I want to let her know I'm sad that I'm missing out, but I don't want to sound like I'm whining. And I want to know why she changed her mind, but I'm scared the answer will just upset me.